Hello, here we are back again.
And we're here for ALTA Talks, episode number 15. And today we have Nick, I'm going to say this wrong,
Barbousas. I'm sure he'll
Oh, sorry, Nick. That was not very good of us. So we're just going to introduce you to Nick. So let's turn Nick on and add him to our stream. Nick, how are you?
Hey, guys. I'm well. How are you guys?
Very good. Very good.
We just had a technical issue. The internet went to sleep for a moment. Here we are again.
The world we're living in now.
Yes. Too many heaters on, and then I turn the dryer on in the house and it just blows it. So then I have to reset.
The life of the office at the home.
Yes.
Right on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, perfect.
Yeah.
So
great.
So welcome to ALTA Talks. This is very exciting.
Yeah. So we're number 15 now. I can't believe we've even got to 15, let alone 1 or 2 or 3. We're just going to take that down a bit. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I just wanted to, Nick, I met you about, 5-6 years ago, maybe?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, somewhere around there. And I was as a athlete, I was having a little niggles here and there. And I heard about Rolfing in the US and some people, and my sister had been doing it. And I just found you by happen chance, and we connected over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And we clicked, and I've been seeing you off and on ever since. And people there's a few clients of ours that have gone back and forth, and people are still wondering what's Rolfing, or what's Rolfing about. And I'm sure you hear that quite often. But
Nick, I haven't really introduced you because you've been in this industry for 27 odd years. Did you want to give us a little breakdown of what you do? I did put it onto our ALTA Talks update out to our clients on the webpage.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Nick Barbousas. You're very close with it. You're getting there with the surname. Yeah. 28 years now. Started off with a history in yoga, actually prior to bodywork, and found yoga through a yoga teacher who was also a teacher of myotherapy back in the day. And so Rolfing, and so then my journey began. I went over to the States, studied at the Rolf Institute, mid-90s, and came back with it, early 90s, and came back with it to Australia. So
where you studied up in Boulder, Colorado? Is that
yeah. So Boulder, Colorado, a small slice of heaven.
Yeah.
I've never been there. I'd love to go.
Yeah.
Oh,
we will.
Beautiful part of the world.
One day.
Beautiful. 300 days of blue sky.
Yeah. Just to jump ahead, Ida Rolf, I guess you'll introduce her in a second, I think. Is that where she passed away? Was that she was in her 90s? I think?
No, she was in her 80s. She passed away in the late 70s. So the Rolf Institute, which is the sort of the non-for-profit organisation that sort of oversees a lot of the training, or most of the training, she created that in 71. Towards the end of her life, really, the last few years of her life, she'd been working with Rolfing from the 50s onwards, but it took all those years to really progress the work to a point where, she could formalise it. She had enough students to put together a school and a community a like-minded community that could really work together and see her vision on into the next century.
Yeah. So keep on going, because Jesse we went on a little scans there. So you were into yoga, then you got into.
Oh yeah. So look, I think I've got into yoga because I was running in those days. Needed something to help me stretch. Got into yoga, fell in love with yoga, stopped the running. Felt it was pretty much a daily practice of yoga, and then from there, the natural progression for me was using yoga as therapy with bodywork, because I did study massage before I even went to the Rolf Institute. And then I could feel that there was just something really missing. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So I came across the work of Dr. Rolf. Then I came across a Rolfer who was running some workshops in Australia, and pretty much sold everything I owned, moved to the States for 18 months, 2 years, and studied. And yeah,
Well, there
best
you go.
decision I made.
It was a good decision to make, wasn't it? You obviously didn't
Yeah.
have a young family back then, and
No, it was just before all of that. So, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things you can make. There are no commitments, and it takes that, and that's been a real barrier of entry into the profession for us in Australia. We're a very small community here. We don't run training in Australia, so you have to go to the States or to Sao Paulo in Brazil or to Europe to do the training. Although there are some satellite courses being run in other parts of the world, but it is a massive barrier to entry, and as a consequence, it keeps our profile quite small. Individually, as practitioners, we're as busy as we want to be, but you don't just do it because of that. You do this because you believe in what you're developing, you're promoting, and you want others to be a part of it as well.
Yeah.
I think that goes pretty much for the whole health and wealth industry or well-being industry, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You don't really go in it for the money. You're in it because you're
No.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you stick to it if you have the neck and you enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You build your own business.
Yeah. Just on I read up a little bit on Ida Rolf, and that she was a pioneer in her day, born in 1880 something, and I can't remember the exact date, but she had getting a PhD in biochemistry in 1920. So
wow,
Yeah.
women in studying, and that's
and then
I think she. Sorry.
did yoga as well, and I guess that's how her smarts and yoga combined to have her sense of how the body moves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Sorry.
So go. I was just going to say, because you have been doing Rolfing not just in Melbourne, because you also go to Sydney. Well, not so much lately, but
Yeah. Yes, I was in Sydney for when I came back to Australia with Rolfing. Even though I'm Melbourne born, I moved to Sydney, and that's where I met my wife, and we, stayed there for quite a few years. Moved back to Melbourne about 10 years ago, but I still continued my practice up in Sydney up until about 2-3 years ago, and intermittently was still going up in that last 2-3 years. But obviously, COVID has really the 3 times I had scheduled to go up, 3 times we were locked down. So
enjoy Melbourne at the moment.
Now this is probably an obvious question. The Rolfing's another name is structural integration. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Now I guess probably everybody wants to know what's the difference between Rolfing structural integration and myofascial release and trigger points and all the other genres of massage, and what's the versus a physio and osteopath. I guess
burning question.
Burning question.
Yeah. So that's a very good question, and it's a fairly common question. Obviously, we get because you want to differentiate why come to me compared to someone else, and it doesn't mean that one has, in my opinion, more merit than the other. But I think where the difference comes is what the goals and the principles of the work that underpin it are, and which drives potentially people to us compared to someone else. So Rolfing itself is very much a principle, goal-orientated approach. It's you mentioned structural integration, so the whole notion of structural integration underpins everything we do. So we're looking at how best we can balance the body, how well can we work with certain characteristics within the body. There are certain goals that we look for within each session and within each series of session, and the principles also govern those sessions as well. Now, you mentioned myofascial release. Myofascial release, or the direct application of myofascial release, is the tool we use. So it's a technique, just like a massage therapy technique, like trigger point therapy is. But quite often, because Dr. Rolf, who was one of the early pioneers in the conversation around fascia, and as a consequence, she developed a lot of what would be a lot of the direct myofascial release techniques that are taught and used in Australia, because some of the early adopters of Rolfing brought it to Australia, taught a lot of workshops on MFR, myofascial release, and then their students began to teach, and as a consequence, we've got 3, 4, 5 generations of teachers of myofascial release who may not even realise that the person that brought it here initially was a couple of the other guys in Australia, myself, I've been running workshops for the last 20 years or so. But myofascial release as a tool, as a technique, is fantastic, but it is a technique to facilitate the change we use for our goals and the principles that govern those goals within the context of a session or within a series of sessions as well.
Yeah, I remember when Jack first went to see you, he did a series of sessions. Yeah,
that's right. So the series is, so Dr. Rolfing, she was trying to figure out, I think, how best to impart her understanding of how the body is, how to work with it, and then what to do with it in the long term. Found that she could create a process around 10 sessions, or what we would classically call, we call it the recipe. Now, those 10 sessions can take someone from a point A to point B, not so much point A to Z, but point A to B. And so within the confines of those 10 sessions, each with particular goals, each with working within the principles of Rolfing, that you can take someone on a journey with their body. So for us, the 10 session is not the end; it's the end of the beginning, so to speak.
Yes.
And so, and it's a really good teaching tool. And she spoke of it. She unfortunately passed away before I was able to get to the institute. But her student, or her Rolfer actually, was one of my teachers, and spoke a lot about the way she worked. And he would say that she would often say that it's just a mechanism. Do it for 4 or 5 years exactly the way I do it, and now from there you'll be able to see how the work unfolds, and you can sort of take it on your own journey. Right. And as a consequence, that's where that 10-step goes.
Yeah. I know my sister's done Rolfing in the US, and it was very, I guess, cut and dry the way she explained it. You do a session every 3 days, the way she put it. Whereas with you, I know it's just, it wasn't cut and dry. It kind of changed as needed.
That's right. So Rolfing, or structural integration, has become an umbrella. Structural integration has become an umbrella term, because since the Rolf Institute, there have been other schools that have come since then. Other students of Dr. Rolf who have a maybe slightly different interpretation of how her message should have been interpreted, and as a consequence, there are other schools. The most common one is the Guild, which is not so well known in Australia, but has a profile internationally. The one that most people in Australia probably know is the work of Thomas Myers, Anatomy Trains. So he basically was a student of Dr. Rolf in her last year or two of life, but he was a Rolfer. He was part of the faculty at the Rolf Institute, and then he had his own interpretation and his own vision of how the work should be. And his Anatomy Trains program came from that, I think. And he's obviously
Yeah, I have that book. Is that the one where, and you can tell me because this is me, because I don't know this area very well.
Go for it.
I think he went. There was different trains of myofascia through your body. Anatomy, yeah. So like there was your side ones, the back ones, all that sort of stuff. So crossing across, you can tell, well, I'm really good at it.
Yeah, upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome.
Yeah, and isn't that now like sort of disputed? Maybe that's not the case because the fascia is all over your body.
So he still sees it that way as well. So fascia itself, we talk about the conversation around structural integration, Rolfing, and fascia is intertwined. It's like, it's two sides of the same coin, that it's quite enmeshed. So for that particular school of thought, which is very similar, or if not the same as what the Rolf Institute and some of the other schools, is that, fascia is a connective tissue. It's most ubiquitous, or most substance in the human body. In fact, if you remove everything else from the body except for the connective tissue system, you have a swimsuit outline of an individual. It just forms around everything and creates everything as well. So the conversation around the anatomy trains, or those lines, and again, I'm not trained within his approach, but I'm just interpreting it the way that I've come across it, is very much looking at how that a whole body approach is used through those connections, through the anatomy, those trains. Another way of looking at it is that interestingly, the meridian system runs very similarly to where his system runs as well. So there's a lot of overlap between that in that way as well.
No, as I would similar to like a Pilates, that there's a lot of different versions of Pilates now as well.
That's right. Although, unlike Pilates, where there is no uniform sort of umbrella organisation which says that codifies it as best practice, with structural integration, we have an organisation, IASI, which is the International Association of Structural Integration, and all schools are part of that. And as a consequence, they're governing ideas of what Rolfing or structural integration is. All the schools have to sort of abide by or agree with, and the curriculums, as a consequence, are really scrutinised to make sure that the quality of work is up to the standard of all the schools it should be, and as a consequence, there's a fairly high standard of work from a student who graduates from one of those schools as well.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah. That's good.
I'm just going to say one thing, just in case anyone wants to chat to us on the way, because I always forget this. This is being the professional. If anyone's listening to us and they do want to make a comment or ask a question to Nick, you can put it in the box and we should get it.
I have a question that was posed to me earlier. Golfing. Now,
yes.
Golf, hitting the little white ball down the fairway. And we have quite a few golfers that come to see us, and one particular golfer that they asked about, their recurring issues around shoulders, and no matter what happens, and they get a massage or a little bit of physio work, but it comes right back. And the question was, how does a golfer see a golfer? How do they golfer?
So that's a really good question. I think we're right. That's a really good question. So the work is because we look at the body not just per se by just where the site of the injury is, but by the global, or how the whole body is functioning. When you work with an athlete, whether they're recreational or professional, you're looking at everything from how they are with their base of support and how that influences everything above. And so as a consequence, with a golfer, we wouldn't just be looking at, for example, how their shoulder is, but we're looking at how the relationship of the left leg with the right leg is, how that impacts the position of the pelvis. Are they balanced left to right? Can they spiral in one direction as easily as they do in the other direction? And what may be impacting or limiting that capacity? And we have that conversation with the client all the way through, pretty much to the top of the head. And so with a golfer, because their sport requires them to move very much within a particular range of movement and a very narrow groove, so to speak, you'd want to be looking how they adapted to that. How can you improve those adaptations? And not necessarily work towards an ideal, but to work towards their ideal. What's best for them? What can they work? How can you best help them adapt to what they have available to them?
Right.
Because with golfers in particular, because I work a bit with golfers as well. They're an obsessive bunch. It really is. It comes down to how they have approximated their, how they see things working, not necessarily how things could be working.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really
that helps.
Yeah.
I'm sure that answers the question for them.
Yeah.
I got another question regarding athletes, and
lots of questions.
Lots of questions. Not silly. Can you? This is a question in sports now. I guess it's been for a while with strength conditioning. Can you be overpowered, like too much gym work? I guess for whether you're a marathon runner or a sprinter, is there a fine line for doing too much strength work? And if you're you got plenty. You can do a 300 kilo bench press, but is it going to help you? Is there a way that if the fascia was moving better, this is my question, I guess, if your fascial system is moving better, you wouldn't need to do as much big gym work? Is that...
Look, it's a really, really good question. And, you know, obviously that conversation around balance is really important, and that, you know, to focus on one theme, for example, we're talking about a benching at you know, 300 pounds, for example, for someone who's a triathlete or a runner, not necessarily balance. And from a Rolfer's perspective, everything is around, it's all about balance. Whether we're talking about how the structures in the front and the back are balanced, whether the structures from the inside are balanced relative to the outside, so the more intrinsic structures relative to the more extrinsic structures. So as a consequence, when you're looking at someone who does focus on one particular area or one particular theme, and it's potentially, if we're looking at it as an example, you know, from our lens, it's not necessarily helping their overall wellness or capacity to actually function within their chosen sport. And from the fascial perspective, as you build and develop in that particular way, you're potentially creating adhesions, and you're limiting your capacity to function. So, for example, if we're looking at that same example at the bench, you'll get your scapula will potentially contract. You'll get a shortening through your pec major, pec minor. You know, so the scapula attached to the humerus, and as a consequence, as you contract, even anteriorly tilt, the humerus will internally rotate, and this will become a fixed position. So you're more internally rotated, and then you're asking the body, your chosen activity, to maybe come back, maybe to lift overhead. That limiting capacity is what, through the fascial system, is one of the things that one would need to address from a Rolfer's perspective.
So one of the key things, I'm going to ask this question. Yeah. One of the key things I know that you do, because we did a course with you on posture, being able to analyse it, found out some things about ourselves, that our posture wasn't as good as we thought it was. I remember that. But obviously that posture is a big part of your role, isn't it? What you do for your clients.
Yeah, so structural integration is, you know, another way that some people call it postural integration, although the conversation around posture and structure are actually intertwined, because, you know, we look at posture, it's just a static moment in time. You take a photo of someone, that's their posture in that moment. But the narrative or the conversation around structure is actually taking a broader conversation, because you're then looking at how that posture adapts over time. And so posture is key to what we do, or working with structure is key to what we do. You know, the word posture is great. I love it because we use it, and we use it a lot because we all identify with it. We understand what it means. It's even a trigger that reminds us that we go, you know, we do straighten up. And, you know, there are websites all over, you know, the net. You know, there's posturegeek.com is one, for example, that talks all about this kind of stuff. They're everywhere now. So, and there's a reason for it, because we identified as an issue. We as Rolfers identified as a key component of what we do, and it underpins every session, every series of sessions we do with someone. You know, all conversations, even every technique we do with someone.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you probably, if I'm just using myself as the researcher one, when I go, say, initially go get a massage, like a remedial massage or something, they'll initially look at my posture, but they don't always look at my posture every single time. You know, because we're going in and we're going, okay, my shoulder's sore. So we'll look at the shoulder and things like that, but we don't actually look at the whole, we don't have that discussion every single time, which is what you do.
Yeah. And that goes back to the very first thing we were talking about, where you mentioned about how, you know, the difference between when you work with something locally, or, you know, and how does this work differentiate to that myofascial or whatever, to a Rolfer, that whole body approach underpins all we do, and we always go back in reference to it. Doesn't mean that we're not looking and respecting the fact that there may be local issues that we need to address, because that's what everyone comes in for, and that's what they identify with. It's really important to deal with those, and we do work directly with that. But not always, but often, and if you do go, that kind of direct work like a physio or a chiro or an osteo is brilliant, and it's an awesome way of dealing with local acute issues. But if it moves beyond that, and there's something little bit more chronic, a little bit more long term, then just treating the local is not necessarily the way to go. You need to look at more of a global context of what's happening within the body and so forth to see what else may be, inhibiting their change or limiting change.
Yeah. Which goes back to Jesse's comment about the golfer who goes and gets something fixed, but then it returns.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, on that note, is it possible to, I guess, fix or completely fix, but like scoliosis or frozen shoulders, or what we see quite common is kyphosis, especially in the late years. People have quite a bit of kyphosis going on, and it's almost like the joints and the bones have frozen, fused.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And we see them walking past, going to the local doctor, the little old ladies bunched over. It's like, oh, come on, come in and see us. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
But
as an offer, is that something that you address, or is it possible to fix it a little bit, I guess?
Very good and a very common question that comes into our practices. And it's a very difficult one to answer, obviously, because everyone is unique and different. But the thing is, when you're looking at someone that comes in with scoliosis, for example, you have to look at, how has their body adapted to it, and how can you help them work with it. But there are so many characteristics that can influence how you can help that person, because has it been with them for their whole life? Has there been a change in even the shape of their vertebrae that influences, wedging, that influences how it rests, one vertebrae on top of the other? Is it age related? Because, young, for example, there's a disproportionate large number of, adolescent teenage girls who have idiopathic scoliosis that enters into their teen years and leaves as they exit teen years. But unfortunately, for a certain percentage, it stays with them. I have done and do work, quite a bit of work with that population, and it's not necessarily that you change the scoliosis per se, but with the help of the treatments and often it's exercise as well. Getting people stronger is really important. Getting their core control is really important for this population. In conjunction with something like what we offer, where you're looking at the adaptations, how well their pelvis sits, how well you can ease the scoliosis or the curvature of the spine, not necessarily fix it, because I'd probably run away from anyone that told me they could fix it, if they had a certain degree of change in the spine, because what you're doing is just helping them live the best kind of life they can live, more than anything else.
Well, that's beautifully put. I love that.
Yeah. On that note, you did talk about exercise. I know in your studio you have some fitness equipment. Do you integrate fitness within a session, or is that something completely separate?
So not directly. It's something I've played around with over many, many years. I have done that periodically, but I don't do it anymore. I find it's for me, and this is a personal position, I find that clear line between offering one and the other is really important. And I think, in the context of a session, we have certain goals. In the context of training, there are certain goals. And I find that keeping them separate is probably the best way to go for me, as far as that goes. And, like I know you guys work a lot with, your posture as part of your practice as well, and you look at it as well. So I like to keep them just separate in that way.
Yes, we're not going to start to do Rolfing.
I think
JC and I were talking the other day.
Unless we move to Boulder, Colorado and go to school.
Yeah. I keep thinking I'm too old. I don't want to study anymore. But then I keep doing something. I'm doing something with prenatal and postnatal exercise and pelvic floor at the moment. Never stop learning, can you? Ever.
Right on. Absolutely.
But But I was just going, what was I going to say? Oh, we were just talking about, like there's some things that we do, like we may use other modalities to help our clients. And we don't necessarily do strength and conditioning. We might add some Pilates into our, exercises, or yoga, stretches, or things like that. But we all play a role, right? And we all are in the health and wellbeing industry, and there's enough there for us all to be contributing in our own way. And we all do it slightly different. But certainly there's times where we do overlap.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing, because we're all learning from each other, being able to talk to people like you who openly talk to us about what you do and how we can work. And we've done one of your courses so that we can then take it back to our studio and use it there. I think it's awesome. I think this is the way of the future. I'd like to think that it's not that idea about, gym down the road, we don't get to know them because they're competitors. Well, actually they're not, because they do something different. We do something different. So sometimes we can send our clients to someone else, haven't we? Because we thought, well, we can't do that for them. So off you go. Well, here's a person, someone else we reckon.
Yeah.
And we're the time we're living in now, the kind of services that you offer, that I offer, they're going to be needed more and more, especially as we open up over the next year or two. It's just going to be, front and center, I think.
Yeah. And I just
the human contact.
Yeah, we don't like to talk about too much, but just this whole last Melbournians, particularly this last 18 months, really going on to 2 years, really, is the changes that we've seen with clients that are suffering because they haven't been able to do their exercise. And then with us, as you know, they do their exercise and then they come up with some pain, and we can help, but we can't diagnose and we can't fix. That's why we send people off to you and to other places wherever we think is going to suit them best, because this is what I've really found. It's heartbreaking to see some of our clients coming to their sessions with us, which we've continued to do some by Zoom, and they're in pain and they haven't been able to come and see you guys. I just think that's awful.
Change the subject, moving slightly this way. If you weren't doing what you are now, Rolfing, what would your other profession be?
Oh my gosh. Look, I have to say, I mentioned how I came into it through the journey through yoga, and I think that was a big part of my life for about 15 years. And I think if one had to go, it was either the yoga or this in the end, and I had to make a choice. And I think I'd probably go back. It would have been that, teaching yoga, but not just that. I think even just more of the human movement side of things.
Because with the physical exercise as well, with all the equipment you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was also interested. This is another side note. What does your family think you do? Do they know what you do?
Well, my immediate family know it very well. They're very and especially now because they're having their twice a week sessions, so they're happy as Larry.
JC often tries to give you a massage. It works sort of.
Well, it's very, very. Look, interestingly, most of them, really try to understand, because it's for a Greek boy from Melbourne moving to the States in the 90s to try and do this obscure kind of body work, which was definitely out of the scope of anything they understood. When I brought it back, and I did even my grandparents at the time, who were in their 80s, 90s, I was treating, tried to understand, and I still think most of them sort of understand, but sort of they're politely nod along, and
that's some sort of.
Well, in fact, it's like JC's brother. JC got a phone call from some guy in London in the middle of the night, and JC rang his brother and said, "Well, why did you send this guy this way?" And he goes, "Oh, I was talking to him because he was talking to him about his wife's MS, and he goes, and he said something about longevity, so I sent him on to you." Yeah. And I go, longevity is something that's important to us, and we try to incorporate that into what we do and into our everyday life. But I don't think it's what we really do.
My family, that all my parents, they think, oh, we have a gym and we just do the bodybuilding type of stuff.
Yeah.
So don't do we?
No. You do. Yeah. Oh, it's big machines and big cans.
Heavy stuff all the time.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
My brother works with a guy that does that, so that's what he thinks we do.
Yeah. But as I said, there's no bare midriffs in our gym. Ever. Did you have any other questions, Jason?
No, you go.
No. So just a little bit more about that, how to balance the whole body. So for us, when we talk about balance and health and well-being, we just, as we've started saying really, because it's something that we do, is we don't just prescribe exercise. We also subscribe to eating well, thinking well, community around us and all those sorts of things, because it's all about that balance that makes us happy and content. What about you? What is that for you? Because it's not all about Rolfing, is it? But what's
is it professionally or personally?
Both.
Well, see, from our perspective, from a Rolfer's perspective, there's a, I don't know if it's a direct quote, but it's positioned as a direct quote. Dr. Rolf once was in a class, and she said, "There's no such thing as physiology; it's pure psychology." Yeah, and then the next day in the class, she said, "I was thinking about it. There's no such thing as psychology. Psychology is pure physiology." So, and then she said, "It's never one or the other; it's both." And I think that stuck with Rolfing. So, and not so much in Australia, but I know in the States, there's a lot of that body-mind connection with practitioners, and not necessarily per se that the practitioner works to do both within the context of the session or with a client, but quite often they work hand in glove with a therapist, whether it's a body-centered psychotherapist or a more traditional approach. There is a lot of that overlap in the conversation, and I think it's really important because we store so much in our tissue that quite often when you want to work through issues that potentially are not within the body, but the body is a barrier to your change, then it can be really worthwhile to address those issues in your body as well. And I know from my own experience with the work, and I have done a little bit of that kind of work indirectly, that they do work very, very well together. There's a very nice fit, and and it's really worthwhile thinking about it as an option at some stage.
Yeah.
Is that sort of similar to what kinesiology, where they do in the US? It's sort of that you're storing trauma in your muscles, tissues, and then they do muscle testing. Is that the similar approach?
Not like that, because for us, we're very clear. We're trained to work with the body. We stay within what we can do. Even if some potentially overlap in intention, it's not really what defines what we do. We're very body-centered, as in our approach. And I think, personally, as a clinician, as a practitioner, I think it's really important to be clear about that, because you don't want to dirty the water. If your goals, you have to keep your goals and your intention very clean. I think to help people as best you can. If you want to do one, do one. If you want to do the other, then do the other. But when the two try to overlap, I think there can be issues there.
Yeah, that is true. You can use too many different things and like muddy the water, and then you don't get much done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if we went the things that go hand in hand with exercise, it's nutrition is number one. Obviously, too many people come to us and say, "I'm here to lose weight," and I go, "Okay, so." Don't know that we can actually achieve that unless we look at your nutrition.
Yeah.
And I know we can't, and we never promise it. In fact, I say, I can't help you do that unless we look at your nutrition and you change that, because it might be obvious by perhaps the way they're looking, maybe not so obvious, but it could be. We call it, even when you're slim and trim doesn't necessarily mean that your nutrition's right. So we like to look at that as well. And then probably when we start to sort of work through those different things, then we'll start asking about their sleep and their stress levels and things like that. So it's sort of like you don't start with the big picture because it's just too big. You've got to start
a little picture,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, and
start
start
here.
to get to know them, and then gain a trust, and then hopefully expand that. But sometimes exercise is the first thing that gets them to change their nutrition because they start thinking differently about themselves and feeling stronger and more energy.
Yeah.
Without
moving better.
They're moving better, yeah. And then that's their next leap. Oh, okay, so I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Well, we've been going for.
We can talk forever. You know that.
It's great.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I just what's on the horizon for Nick when the doors open?
Look, that's a really good question. It's one, obviously, I've got a lot of time to think about at the moment. Obviously, this work is quite central to who I am as well. So that'll continue. I'm not quite sure how it will look big picture though. So, but more of the same, more of the Rolfing.
I know you did some workshops. Are there any?
So. Look, the workshops is actually a real. I get a lot of joy out of running them, and there's a whole series of them, as I've probably mentioned to you in the past. So I'd love to be in a space where we can, open up enough to be able to run those and just move in that direction. Because, as a lifelong student of this kind of work, I see myself as that. I'm not an expert. I'm a student, and I work with that as my premise. Teaching is one of those ways where it's just a truth stick, even for me. You really challenge your own beliefs in what you're doing, and students challenge you as well. So, and I love that. So the workshops, help in that way as well. So I do feel excited about moving on with those as next steps. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to when you have the workshop.
When things open up again.
Right on.
When JC asked that question, I thought, really, we're just continually evolving. We've had to rotate. We've had to look at the way we do our businesses. We've had to go, okay, where do we go? Which is why ALTA Talks came up, is because we've gone, okay, we're in lockdown. What else can we do? We can talk to our locals, because you're in Camberwell. But, let's get into that local community and see what we can do and share what we know. And
great idea.
We've continued it. We just do one a month. Next month, I think I'm actually going to go outside of Victoria and ask my sister, because she's a Pilates and yoga guru. She's been in the industry for a very long time, had her own businesses and moved around, and now she's in Queensland and opened up again her own place. And she and JC can talk forever as well. So everybody listening, that's what we're doing next. We're talking to my sister.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. JC rang her the other day, and he's come back and he's doing all these new exercises. I've gone, what are you doing? Because I've been talking to your sister. And when you talk to us, we look a bit the same and we talk a bit the same. And
very fast.
Yes, we're very fast. She's the younger one, though. She's the pretty one.
Nick. So, if people want to get a contact with you, what's the best method of communication with?
The website is probably the best way to go, especially in this fluid time. oloshealth.com.au.
Yeah, I will put
it this one.
I don't know. Yeah.
OLOS Health, wasn't it?
Yeah. OLOS. So OLOS is a Greek word for whole. So it's WHOLE. So whole health.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Oslo when you spell it the wrong way.
How many people come in asking for that?
I've done that. How many times have I done that? Wait. Flip the letters around and you get it right.
Yeah. Well, Nick, it's been really lovely to talk to you. I have just learned a whole wealth of knowledge today about how to balance the body. It's the inside, outside. It's quite a different view from anyone that we've spoken to. Everyone's got their own ways, like you said, but it's been really, I love it. I just think there's a lot more to this than I had ever, and
thank you so much for the opportunity as well. I really appreciate it, coming on board. It's been great talking with you guys.
It's been great talking to you too.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you. We're going to
Thank
say
you.
goodbye.
Thank you.
We're going to keep talking to our clients. Or
Well,
whoever's
we'll
listening.
see you when
And
things open up.
Yes.
Fingers crossed, mate. Take care. All the very best to you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 So that was really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was good.
Gosh, I
Yeah.
learned so much
So,
from that.
Even though I've been going to see Nick off and on for quite a few years, I still learned even more.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
a bit
know.
more about what the Rolfing or structural integration is.
Yeah. So I'm really keen to learn a little bit more about that now. I might have to do my own little reading so that when I'm talking to clients and we're recommending them to Nick, because JC's always recommending to Nick, but I wasn't quite as understanding of how it all
I guess
works,
it's for me, it's the big picture.
Yeah.
He looks at you, head to toe, move around, spin around, and can see how twisted. I tend to be slightly twisted most of the time.
Yes,
and,
you are, aren't you?
Yeah.
Not just in the brain as well.
Mentally and physically. And
but we love him anyway.
and Nick can take my head off and spin it around and put it back on correctly.
Yeah.
And I always come out of there feeling, okay. And for me, the 5 sessions in a row, not one after the other, but maybe 5 weeks of it, I feel I'm put together and I have my head screwed on a bit better, and I'm functioning so much better after a few sessions with Nick, because it does take the layers. It's not a one session and you're fixed.
That's right.
Which is just like, I guess, anything.
Yeah. Well, that was really good. So our next episode, which is number 16, like I said before, we're going to be talking to my sister, Erica Manning. And she is a Pilates and yoga, I say guru, but she really is. She's been in the industry for a long time. She lives and
breathes it.
Yes, like us, really. Yeah, so she and I can talk forever about health, and we actually, because she's got her own business, we also talk about a lot about marketing and how to keep our businesses going through this. Though she's been lucky in Queensland because they haven't had hardly any lockdowns.
No, and when you're listening to Linda and Erica speaking, put your ears up because they're going to be speaking quite fast. I'm going to have to get them to slow down.
You'll just keep pinching me and going, stop, slow down.
Take a breath.
Well, that's really good. Anyway, we will say goodbye for now. I'm just going to find our magic button just to say, really enjoyed this talk today. It was great fun, and we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.